Today, we'll be breaking down the Columbus Blue Jackets 2024 NHL draft class as well as their prospect pool as a whole.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. My name is Sebastian High, and I'm the Director of European Scouting over at Dobber Prospects, typically joined by Hadi Kalakesh, Director of North American Scouting at Dobber Prospects, but he is still down with illness, so I'll be wrapping up this week's content for you all. But before we jump into the episode today, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Alrighty, so the Columbus Blue Jackets had a very interesting draft class where they nabbed a talent that has really built a fantastic foundation down the middle for them for the foreseeable future into the next decade, maybe even 2 decades, by drafting Cayden Lindstrom at 4th overall. But there are some other interesting selections in this draft class as well. So let's dig right into the players that they selected on that fateful draft day in Las Vegas in the blistering heat of the Nevada desert. And it was a really interesting day for them. Obviously, on day one, they only made a single selection. They were picking at 4th overall, and they had quite a few options on the table. Whether they wanted to go pick the big centerman that they end up selecting in Cayden Lindstrom, or for the elite dynamism of a guy like Ivan Demidov, or any of the defensemen that remained on the board. Only Levshunov was off the board at this stage, and there was a fair few options here, but they ended up opting for the power forward centerman who has a ton of developmental runway in Cayden Lindstrom. This is a player who is one of the kindest people you're going to meet off the ice, and one of the people you would least want to suit up against, playing against on the ice. He's incredibly sweet and kind when you meet him in person, but on the ice, he's anything but. He plays with violence and viciousness. He's a pest. He uses his physicality and strength to make the lives of his opponents really, really difficult. And he does that whether it's applying defensive pressure or using his frame, using his reach, using his strength to protect possession and create dynamic offense. This is a very skilled and creative player at his core. Don't look past that element of his game just because he's absolutely massive. Yes, he's 6'4". He's over 200 pounds. He has a massive frame, but he has this deft amount of skill in this game as well, whether it be one-touch goal scoring from in tight under pressure, being able to score from range. He's a really creative like playmaker as well. There's so much to like in this game. And of course, there have been some injury concerns with him. He had a hand injury earlier on in the season, and he had a herniated disc in his back, which allowed him to miss a significant part of the back half of the year before returning for the playoffs. But I wouldn't be overly concerned. Every NHL team that had got access to his medical records, and I don't think I saw a single NHL GM, scout, management person, whatever, say anything about their concern about these injuries, really, publicly. But I think that Lindstrom's going to be a fantastic addition to this Columbus Blue Jackets organization. The 1-2 punch of him and Adam Fantilli long-term as these skilled, big centermen that can do just about everything, and both still have so much runway in terms of improving and refining, and both have sky-high first-line potential, and maybe they even end up on the same line long-term. Very exciting times to be a Columbus Blue Jackets fan. But their second pick of the draft, the first pick on day 2, was Charlie Elick, another violent WHLer, but this time a right-shot defenseman, and I really like this pick. Elick reminds me quite a bit of guys like Braden Schneider, in terms of being able to combine a high degree of mobility with really a bunch of aggression defensively. And he's a really, really sound defenseman. I've loved the chaotic aggression he's shown at the WHL level, which certainly will need to be reined in a little bit. But he's shown at like the U18 World Championships that he can play really well into a bit more of a conservative defensive system where he sits back, he invites pressure towards him before snuffing it out, rather than going for a big like play suffocating hit to defend the defensive blue line. He's a really good skater. He's really aggressive. He's strong. He's smart defensively as well. I've really liked his decision making and his risk assessment in the defensive zone. And he makes a really good first pass as well. That ability to make that good first pass is what I think will translate him into a really solid two-way role at the NHL level. Not the biggest point producer of all time, though he does have a pretty hard shot from the blue line. He lacks the dynamic upside that other defensemen in that Columbus system do have, whether it be David Jiricek or Denton Mateychuk. I think that Alec really fits in nicely to provide a bit more of that physical shutdown element while also being able to contribute in the breakout. Next up, with their second pick of the second round, they picked a goaltender in Evan Gardner, a really interesting selection in my eyes. He's a bit undersized for a goaltender at 6'1", but he has very sound mechanics. He's very controlled in his movements, and he's quite intelligent. He doesn't allow many goals from weak angles or from long range. He tracks pucks well. He closes down his gaps really nicely. He doesn't really let in those soft goals that kind of make you frustrated to see at the junior level. And he plays a bit of a professional style in that sense. I think that in terms of his athleticism, there's still some room to grow, being able to compensate a little bit more for that subpar frame with getting post to post with a bit more explosiveness, I think is going to be important in his development. But he put up really good numbers as a WHL rookie last season with Saskatoon. Putting up over a 920 save percentage in the regular season. And they really needed to add a goaltender to that system. With Daniil Tarasov graduating to the NHL ranks, there really is a lack of talent in that goaltending pool. So investing a second-round draft pick to just swing on their favorite goaltender left available at that moment, I think was a pretty intelligent swing. I think I personally would have gone down a different route in terms of goaltending, and I would have also looked to snap up a guy like Ryerson Leenders in the later rounds. He ended up going at 219 to the Buffalo Sabres because there really is a lack of depth in that goaltending pool as well. But still, I think Gardner is a decent addition here, and I'm curious to see how his development will progress. They also picked up Luca Morelli from the Oshawa Generals, the 6'2", 185-pound two-way defenseman who is a right shot, and he put up 57 points through 67 games this past season, and really solid player. I like his skating. He's pretty solid in most aspects of the game. He's a real all-rounder, but I think that if he's developed more as like a defense-first guy, that's where he has the most room to grow and the most upside. Also kind of what Columbus will be looking in their system to kind of foster that type of defensive impact, and I think that Morelli fits in really nicely. I think it's a pretty shrewd selection in the mid rounds. And yeah, I think he's my favorite selection of the defensemen, and they picked 3 defensemen to finish off this draft class. And he's my favorite of the bunch. Next, we have Tanner Hendricks. Tanner Henricks, a 6'4", 205-pound right shot defenseman who played with Lincoln in the USHL last year. And I heard a couple of rumors of him even going a lot higher than he ended up going on draft day. They selected him there in the 4th round at 101st overall, but I heard some rumblings he could go inside that top 64, but he didn't end up going there. But he combines that like massive frame with also a very like young birthday for the draft class. He's a July 25th, 06 birthday, and while he only put up 9 points in 59 games, he's a real shutdown defensive defenseman. You're not drafting him to put up a massive amount of points. You're looking for him to leverage his size, his range, his reach, his strength to shut down play in his own end. And that can kind of also be said for the next guy here in Luke Ashton, an absolute behemoth of a left shot defenseman. 6'7", 231 pounds, who was a behemoth amongst boys at the BCHL level last season. And he even scored 18 goals among his 36 points in 53 games at that level. The decision making has been pretty rough in the couple viewings I've logged of him. He's extremely raw, but he's going to be developing in the college ranks in the US and will definitely need a good amount of time to round out his game, iron out the hectic nature of his on-puck decision making and that hesitancy under pressure. But an interesting swing on just a massive frame of a defenseman in the late rounds. But it was clear that Columbus approached this draft wanting to add size and physicality, both at forward with their Cayden Lindstrom selection and on the back end, while also shoring up their defensive prospect pool. I think as a whole, this class deserves a B-plus grade. Landing Cayden Lindstrom at 4th overall is excellent value. I think that's a fantastic selection for Columbus, and fans are going to adore this kid when he makes the jump, though it will take a couple years. So don't rush this player. He's going to need a bit of patience, but it'll be more than worthwhile at the end of the day. And while I think I would have taken some other swings on a combination of upside and intelligence in those mid to late rounds, Columbus clearly saw an area of need in the size department, and they doubled down on that. But we'll explore that prospect pool as a whole a bit more in depth in that next segment. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to LED headlights, exhaust kits, and far more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, eBay Motors always has exactly what it is that you are looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, which is available to US customers only, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Alrighty, let's delve into this prospect pool as a whole here in the second segment, because there's so much to be excited for if you are a Columbus Blue Jackets fan. Obviously, there's already quite a few high-end players that are in the NHL ranks that aren't going to be included in this breakdown, whether it be Adam Fantilli or Kent Johnson or David Jiricek, right? There's so many high-end talents that have already made that leap to the NHL level. But let's dig into the guys that haven't made that leap, at least full-time just yet. Starting off, obviously, Cayden Lindstrom, another foundational core piece for this franchise moving forward that is a type of player that you want to and can build around. I'm very excited to see how he fits into that long-term lineup, whether it be as a first-line winger or a second-line center slotting in behind Adam Fantilli. If that is your 1A, 1B punch long-term, I think that you're in great shape. But I also think they could do some real damage together. So it'll be interesting to see what Columbus does on that front. Gavin Brindley, hopefully is going to be making his jump to full-time NHL minutes this season, because this is one of my favorite players. The combination of motor and intelligence and offensive skill, whether it be in the goal scoring or playmaking departments, playing with high pace under heavy pressure, being able to out-leverage opponents that are far bigger and stronger than him, and finding the really dangerous spots in soft ice in the offensive zone, getting involved in the buildup on the rush, getting involved offensively, and really leveraging his intensity and intelligence to provide a ton of defensive pressure to support his defenders. And to get that from a winger especially is especially valuable. So he's one of my favorite players. I'm really curious to see what he's able to do with NHL minutes, especially if they're able to foster that that continued chemistry between him and Fantilli. And I am very excited to see what the future has in store for this player. Luca Pinelli is another guy that I've been a massive fan of for quite a few years now. I watched his first ever OHL game live, and I tracked his entire development with the Ottawa 67s in the OHL. He scored 50 goals last season, really took the mantle as the guy in Ottawa in the OHL, and was their primary creative driver. He's a really intelligent play builder. He has a decent amount of skill on him. He's a solid goal scorer. I think the playmaking game also has room to grow when he's in a system and on a team where he has high-end goal scorers to pass to that he can trust to put the puck in the back of the net, which hasn't really been the case with the 67s in recent times. And his combination of intelligence, defensive commitment, and goal scoring ability is a really, really fun one. He's also really pesky and intense, and kind of in that Gavin Brindley mold in some ways as well. William Whitelaw is another interesting talent at forward for Columbus. He's developing over at the University of Michigan. I'm curious to see how he'll be able to combine with a guy like Michael Haig at that level this upcoming year, especially with Matt Greden deciding to commit to the OHL rather than the NCAA route. There might be an opening for added minutes and play time for Whitelaw to just continue to refine his game. He's incredibly dynamic and dangerous with the puck on his stick. It's a wicked shot, really pacey and quick player as well. And he's not a slam dunk NHLer, but he does have that top six boomer bust type of upside. Jordan Dumais is a player that I'm very curious as to continue to see at the professional level. He's so intelligent. He's a fantastic playmaker from the periphery, but playing inside, getting to the middle of the ice, playing under pressure, making those decisions in split seconds under that heavy pressure is something that he'll need to build up to really solidify his NHL potential. But if he's able to make that jump, I see a play that could be a really intelligent and useful middle six piece. He's definitely undersized. He's not particularly physically engaged. The defensive engagement's also a work in progress, but the raw playmaking ability is really impressive, and he'll finally be playing at a level where he'll be challenged on that front, because the QMJHL just wasn't challenging him anymore, going back to his draft year season almost. Another QMJHLer is James Malatesta, who I do think will be making the leap to the NHL this season. I'm very curious to see how that goes. This is a really intelligent and incredibly quick forward who applies a bunch of pressure, never gets his foot off the gas pedal. And while I think the offensive upside may be a little bit limited, he's a really solid two-way piece. And I think he could be slot into a bottom six role as soon as this year for Columbus. I mean, he almost cracked the roster last season at a training camp as well. And yeah, I'm curious to see what the future holds for him. Luca Del Bel-Belluz is another interesting player, kind of the polar opposite to James Malatesta. His speed and his feet are not the strength by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a really solid goal scorer, has a wicked shot that he can score from medium range. He uses his frame to protect possession and to get shots off from in tight. There's definitely still a lot to round out in this game, and I think a couple seasons in the AHL will do him a lot of good in refining those elements, but there's definitely a potential for like a third-line scoring centerman here who also brings a ton of size to the equation. But switching our attention to the defensive core, there's also a bunch of fun players in this regard in that Columbus Blue Jackets system, whether it be Denton Mateychuk, who just came off of a dominant season in the WHL with the Moose Jaw Warriors. The dynamic left shot defenseman is a bit undersized, but he's a really fun skater. He's constantly activating in the offensive zone. He's so aggressive offensively, and he wants to make things happen. He takes risks, but they're calculated. He gets back defensively when something goes awry. And I think that this could really be a highly entertaining top four defenseman long term. Whether he makes the NHL as of this season, I don't know, but a season in the AHL would honestly help his development as well. And if he does crack the NHL roster, then good on him, and I'm excited to see him in that role. But I think that taking a bit of a patient approach with his development would do him a lot of good. Corson Kuhlman's another player who already has been playing in the AHL with Cleveland, but he's a player that's kind of gone a bit unheralded in that Columbus system. I mean, there are so many defensemen that are trying to make their mark and crack that lineup, and I don't know if Kuhlman's will be able to do so this upcoming season, but he's a solid two-way right shot defenseman with a heavy shot and intelligent defensive habits, and I think that there is a future for him as a number 4, number 5 defenseman at the NHL level. It might just take a couple years' time to develop into that type of role. Andrew Strothman is another fun player, really dynamic offensively. He's very much like a Denton Mateychuk light. He loves to activate offensively. He takes those risks. He's not as calculated or refined in that risk taking, and I think that the tools are also a step below Mateychuk's. But if Mateychuk ends up being your offensive driver in a second pairing as number 3, Strothman could top out as a number 5 on a third pairing, playing a very similar role. Charlie Elick and Stanislav Svozil are 2 more solid defensemen that I think will be NHLers once they top out. Whether that be with Columbus or in a different NHL system remains to be seen, but I'm hoping Svozil can get into some consistent NHL minutes this upcoming season. He's a player I've always really had a great appreciation for, from his level of intelligence and defensive commitment to the offensive flashes. I mean, he's scored some of the more entertaining goals of the World Juniors that we've seen in recent years, with an end-to-end rush against Team Canada a couple seasons ago. And overall, a player I just have a real appreciation for. Charlie Elick, obviously, too, has that upside as a second pairing shutdown guy, and he's going to need a bit of time, but in 2 or 3 years, I think he could be a really, really valuable NHL piece already. And last but not least, the goaltender, the one notable goaltender in this category, recently drafted Evan Gardner, we talked about in the last segment. Going to need time, obviously, but the foundation of intelligence and refined habits in net is something that clearly Columbus valued in selecting him in the second round. I think overall, this prospect pool should get like an A- grade. Obviously, the grade would have been a lot higher if guys like Fantilli and Yurchek would have been included in this, but still, as it stands, it's a strong prospect pool with a lot to be hopeful for. And in terms of areas of need, more goaltenders would be a clear area that I think should get some focus in the upcoming drafts or by means of acquisition. I think that Yaroslav Askarov would be a fantastic target if you are the Columbus Blue Jackets, and also adding another top 6 forward and top 4 defensemen in terms of prospect projections in the upcoming drafts. You never have enough of those, and I think that Columbus are a couple of those away from being real, like, perennial contenders once this prospect pool ages into the NHL level. But that wraps up this second segment for us. And in the final segment, we'll be looking ahead at the 2024-25 season, their expectations, and some of the point projections for the young players in Columbus. If you want last-minute tickets, Game Time is the place to be. With Game Time, you can get awesome last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% on whatever event you are interested in attending, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, whatever it is that you are interested in, Game Time has you covered. Game Time also offers awesome zone deals where you pick the zone or the section and Game Time selects the seat for you for added potential savings, especially if you have a really tight schedule and something opens up for you last minute where you have some time to go out and do something fun, to treat yourself to an event. Game Time is exactly what you need. Game Time also gives you a lowest price guarantee. If you find a better price than what is listed on Game Time, just have to show that receipt to Game Time and you will get 110% of the difference in order to go with Game Time to your event. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alrighty, let's wrap up this episode here for the Columbus Blue Jackets, an organization that is certainly trending in the right direction. I think the addition of Don Waddell at GM is going to accelerate that rebuilding process for sure. Very curious to see what's going to happen with a lot of the older players in this lineup, but let's continue to focus on the young studs. I think that Columbus should take a step forward in the coming season. I think they'll be able to get out of that bottom 5 range where they've been stuck for quite a few the past couple seasons this upcoming year, but the East has just been so awfully competitive. But with a selection of elite young talents taking added steps in their development, I really think that hockey is going to be fun to watch in Columbus this season. With Adam Fantilli and David Jiricek and Kent Johnson, who is primed for a bounce-back season, there's a lot to be excited for in Columbus. I think one of the primary things to build off of this season, which is I think an overall theme with these rebuilding teams is fostering chemistry among the young stars, whether it be Adam Fantilli or Johnson or Gavin Brindley, David Jiricek, Stanislav Svozil, who might even be making the NHL. Cole Sillinger should have a bounce back year as well. There's a lot of young players that have a lot of skill and very specific talents that in the right system, in the right environment, while given a long leash to make mistakes and practice and learn to create offense and generate offense consistently at the NHL level, could really take a big step in their development. I think that fostering continued chemistry on that Russian line in that middle six would be really fun to watch. That line of Dmitry Voronkov, Yegor Chinnikov, and Kirill Marchenko was fantastic last year for Columbus, and they weren't getting as many minutes as I think they should have been getting as a combination. But if they are able to continue that chemistry this season, I think that you have a really entertaining and young middle six line to build off of. And also on the power play, getting these players more puck touches in space where they're able to dissect NHL defensive structures with a little bit more patience and a bit more strategy, and learning to do so as a unit overall rather than as individual players will do a lot for the development of this group. Allowing these young players to just make mistakes and learn is going to be key for this season of the rebuilding Columbus Blue Jackets. And I think that you could see them get into that bottom 8 to bottom 16 range of the NHL standings if you really see significant leaps in development among these players. I think Adam Fantilli could hit the 20-goal plateau, maybe even the 60-point range. I think 55 would be a bit more reasonable for his point projections this season. David Jiricek, I think, could hit the 25-point range as well. I'm hoping to see him get an increase in minutes, especially with guys like Ivan Provorov on expiring deals. And Kent Johnson has to take a leap. He should not be starting this upcoming season in the AHL, and he should be getting top 6 minutes at the NHL level, ideally alongside a player like Fantilli. I think if you have those two guys with a guy like Boone Jenner, for instance, to clean up some of the mistakes, do some of that dirty work in the offensive zone, and connect play between the forwards and the defensemen, I think that you could really see those young guys take some big steps. Gavin Brindley hopefully will also be a full-time NHLer this season. Fingers crossed on that one. I want to see this guy in the NHL for all 82 games this season. And I think if he does make that leap playing third line minutes or so, he could also be a 15-goal and 35-point guy. There's a lot of upside with this player, and I think that could start off right out of the gate with solid depth production. And I also think that Cole Sillinger is going to make a leap in his development this season. We saw him really stagnate this past season, but he has a wicked shot. He's a really skilled offensive player, and in a season where there's hopefully a bit more consistency and structure in Columbus, he'll be able to take those steps in his development. But I'm curious to hear from you all. Which players in this Columbus system are you most hopeful for? Which players are you expecting to take big steps in this upcoming season, whether it be at the NHL level or down in the depth chart in the prospect pool, in the AHL or in the various junior leagues across the world? And let me know, which players did I miss talking about? In every one of these team breakdowns, I only have so much time to focus on a variety of players, and there's always going to be a couple players that fan bases know a bit better than I do, that they are very excited for. So please let me know in the comments below. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Engagement is really what we're looking for here. We want to have a conversation with you all in the comments below. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It is always incredibly appreciated. And for your second listen of the day, go on and check out Locked On Sports Today, a 24-hour news show with all the sporting news you could possibly want to have access to. I'm Sebastian Hyde, the Director of European Scouting over at Dabra Prospects, typically joined by Hadi Kalakesh, who will hopefully be back for next week's shows. But that wraps things up for today, and we hope you tune back in very, very soon.